Here's a riddle. How do you build native cross-platform mobile applications quickly without having to rewrite code and hire consultants at a huge cost? Titanium from Appcelerator. Called the easy button for mobile application development, it allows you to focus more on what's important, getting product out the door. Join the more than 1.5 million active developers who have created over 13,000 apps at www.appcelerator.com. Hello everybody! Welcome to Untether.tv, where we wrangle rock stars in the mobile industry and force them to tell us our secrets. And I have, obviously, a rock star with me, and some with some great pedigree, dating back into the early days of streaming media, and before that. And he's got a new startup. It's called Yobongo, and it's a different approach on group chat. And I'm not going to do it any justice by describing it. I'm going to actually let Caleb do it for you. So we've got Caleb Elston, who is the co-founder and CEO of Yobongo. Caleb, thank you so much for taking some time this evening and coming to talk to the folks who are watching and listening to this.
Of course, thank you. I appreciate it. So Yobongo is a new mobile communication that lets you chat with the people who are around you and sort of form new connections. And so you open up the app, we place you in a group of people who are all wanting to communicate in your city, and over time, smaller and smaller rooms. And you basically can talk about whatever is on your mind and whatever is happening around you. And if you find people who are interesting to you, you can maintain that relationship by starting a private conversation. And now you can keep in touch with that person and build a relationship with them.
So you're famous for saying, I've read a lot of about what you guys are doing. I haven't seen the application other than some of the demos online.
Sure.
But you've famously said that this is not so much about location as it is about people, right? That's the different take on the way that you do things. Explain that so that we can...
Sure, yeah, so that's exactly right. We think that people are what matter most in communication systems, and they haven't actually been at the forefront for a very long time. And the reason we think that's the case is that a lot of systems in the past have been built around computers talking to each other or switchboards talking to each other in the phone era. And we've just sort of slowly added on people more recently. And they're still pointers, right? Like you have an email address, or you have a phone number, or you have an IM. And all of these are abstractions of you. And when you want to communicate with someone, you actually just want to talk to you. Like, I just want to talk to Robert. I just want to talk to Caleb. I want to talk to David. And so what we really wanted to think about was, how would you build a communication system that was built today that would take advantage of the fact that you should talk to people and let the computers do what they're best at, which is routing those messages. But they're not the important part. The people are the important part.
Isn't it funny that we've come this way? Is that for so long people didn't matter, but people were the ones that created the virality of these kind of things, like the telephone, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You always needed somebody at the other end of the line to be able to speak with, and the telephone was about closing the gap and increasing communications between people in a convenient way. And how did we get so wrong? How did we get so far away?
We've done a lot of study of this, but I think ultimately what's happened is that people have such an innate desire to communicate that they'll put up with a lot of barriers. Yeah. And so I think the fact that you have to memorize a 7 or 10-digit number to get in touch with someone you care about is ridiculous.
So
and
true.
It doesn't make any sense, and yet we put up with it because that's what we've been told we have to do, and there's no way for any individual person to solve that. And so it's a perfect opportunity for a company to come along and say, we think we should be able to solve that. And so we're not solving the phone problem right now. But I think that sort of is illustrative of the way that we view the world, that we're more interested in how do you foster authentic conversations with people.
Yep.
That going up to someone in the real world and introducing yourself is a very, very stressful process for most people.
Yep.
And so that's on one end. And then on the other end, you've got people who know they will make new friends in the world, but they have no systematic way of doing it. And most of the time it happens because you meet someone at work, or you met someone at school, or one of your friends introduced you to someone.
Right.
But there's a big chasm between wanting to meet people and having the capacity to do so. And technology is a great capability of compressing things and making things that used to be really hard to do easier. And so we sort of viewed the problem of, are there things you could do with technology to help solve this problem? And we looked to services on the dating sphere, and we've seen that dating has been revolutionized by online tools.
Absolutely.
But they haven't actually thought about how would you do it more broadly, right? Like, you can't be on a dating site if you're not dating someone, or like wanting to date someone.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be on one if you're dating someone.
Pretty sure my wife would have a problem with that.
Exactly,
Yes.
right? But like, she would probably be totally fine if you made a new friend, right? And someone who's really cool and someone who's fun.
Yep.
So there's no service that's independent about meeting people who are like a non-creepy way.
Yeah.
So we really wanted to sort of tackle that problem, and that's why we are working on Yobongo. And we can get into more details about how it works specifically,
Sure.
but I think that's sort of how we frame the conversation, that meeting people is very hard. Most people are new people, and most communication systems are computer first, human second.
Yep.
What would happen if you reimagined it from the ground up with people at the core, and even further, mobile at the core?
Yeah. And taking the creep factor out of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, it's a great approach, because you find you know, there are certain processes in life today, like this way, that you have to remember a phone number, for example, to communicate with somebody, or you know, in the case of some of the check-in technology, it's you know, it's location first, people second.
Yes.
Or it's a competition as opposed to communication, right? Which so different. It's like you're putting bad code on top of bad code, right? So just because the idea started this way doesn't mean that you can't reimagine the way that idea should have started, because circumstances have changed so dramatically since that idea started, right?
Exactly. Yep. I mean, we think that what's happened is there's just been a slow, steady evolution of having more systems available. So, for instance, the telephone was traditionally landline based, right? And then we went and had cell phones, and it was the exact same paradigm.
Yeah.
And we didn't actually question it. It was sort of like this sort of old saying that putting a radio show on TV isn't a TV show, right?
Yep.
That's what we did in the beginning days. Like, as soon as television came along, they took radio shows and they put a camera in front of those radio hosts.
Yeah.
And it wasn't compelling, but people weren't inspired yet to actually think about what this new medium could accommodate.
Yeah.
And so we just don't think people have really gone through the thought process of, how would you reimagine this, and how would you make something new possible, such as meeting people? And the other big piece is really, mobile phones are immensely capable. Like, your audience clearly understands that, right? But we still don't take it for granted, right? Most services don't take for granted that they have persistent internet. They don't take for granted that they have location. They also don't take for granted that you have this device with you at all times. They are still mini versions of websites that were built around the standards of the late 90s, right? And they have just been evolved.
Yep.
But when you start from scratch and first principles and say what matters, you come up with a very different set of things. And that's what we think we've done with Yobongo, and that's why we're really excited about it. And I think that's why we've been getting some attention, is because we're challenging a lot of things that people used to just believe were true.
Yep.
And when you do that, people take notice. So that's what we're doing.
No, so talk about that just for a second. Is you know, I want to talk a lot about some of the things that you're doing as well with the product itself. But you guys have set out to change ultimately a paradigm, right? So you're reimagining something that maybe wasn't working quite effectively, or was working for some people, but it really didn't put the person first. Does it frighten you? Are you worried about having to go out and change people's minds and perception of the way these things work? Or is it just, this is the right thing to do, and you know, eventually what happens, people will catch on?
So I think it's the latter. I think we, in using the app for the past almost year, have seen that there's something special about it, and that we know that our usage of it has only increased over time as it's gotten better.
Okay.
And more recently, as we've started to let people into the app, we've just been overwhelmed and sort of overjoyed at the fact that other people really enjoy it too, and that they're sort of this switch where people tell us there's a time before Yobongo and a time after Yobongo, and like, that's the biggest compliment, right? Because We see tweets already that people say, Yobongo is now the first thing I check in the morning and the last thing I check at night.
Yep.
And that's really, really exciting. I mean, we see people using the app more than 10 times per day. We see people sending more than 30 messages per day. I mean, the amount of usage is really incredible. And I think that you want to have a product that a small number of people can be extremely passionate about, because that passion is what actually gets you to grow, right? There's a lot of tricks you can do around virality and putting sharing at the end of your flow with Twitter or Facebook, or trying to buy Facebook ads and optimize that and doing conversion page optimizations.
Yep.
But all of those things presuppose that people want what you're selling, right?
Or that you can articulate it very clearly in a way that they'll get it.
Yeah. And so like we sort of like to think that in a race, we would rather be the guy who's out of shape but still wins than the guy who wins by a little bit and is in perfect shape, right? So we'd rather have this kernel of an app that is just really, really compelling. And sure, it's missing a lot of features, and sure, there are things that are wrong with it, but at the core, it's something people really enjoy and that we can be very proud of what we've built so far, and that resonates with people. And so, you know, there's a lot of talk about minimum viable product these days. And I think a lot of people conflate that with this idea that build something very, very simple and like not well and see what sticks. And our point of view, and my point of view in particular, is that you still need to build something that's compelling. Just build something small. Get at the kernel of what it is you're building. What is the thing that you know that the rest of the world doesn't yet know, that when they discover it will make them realize there's something new that they hadn't even considered, right? And there's, I mean, that's the difference between something that you're trying to really change things versus evolutionary improvements. And there's no value judgment around. Clearly, we need products that just are a little bit better than what came before. But if you really want to try and have a service that can have outsized impact, then you really want to consider what it is that you do that's unique, that you understand about the world that most people don't yet, and how do you show that off?
Yeah, and then again, there's always that piece that it's got to be you believe in it, the people that you've got, the like-minded people that are using it believe in it. But it's always that hope. As an entrepreneur, it's always filled with a little tinge of hope that says, you know what, you know, entrepreneurs are special people, and it's kind of, you know, bordering on maybe a little bit crazy, right? I mean, if an idea isn't worth having unless it's crazy, right? So, and those crazy ideas are what created Facebook, what created Twitter, what created all of these paradigm-shifting companies, right? So every entrepreneur has that little bit of hope that says, well, yeah, I hope I'm not crazy. Or I hope this idea is crazy enough because it's the right approach to a problem, like, you know, an age-old problem. And so with everything, it's always that concern. So you guys are leading up to the launch. Is that kind of, does that sit in your back of your mind, or are you that comfortable with what you've got? And the feedback has been so good that you're confident.
Oh, I wouldn't say that we're confident that it's going to succeed. I mean, that would be quite presumptuous. I think that we're getting more confident that we're onto something, right? That there's some kernel of truth, there's some kernel of interestingness with what we've built. And I think what we want to do is keep pushing on that, right? Like keep pushing on what makes it special, keep pushing on what people are responding to. And to your point about being crazy, when we were thinking about leaving JustinTV and we were talking to some of our close friends about it, a lot of the feedback was, you know, guys, what are you thinking? Like,
you're nuts.
Chat rooms in the in the late 90s were like cesspools. Like it was all spammers and trolls and pedophiles and all these things, right? Like, but what was interesting when we looked at it, like that's what people remember, right? They remember the bad things. But what's interesting is spammers and trolls and bad guys go where the attention is, because that's their business, is to gather attention. And so you need to go one step before that. And when you realize that, then you're like, wow, actually, chat rooms were one of the main reasons that people joined the internet, was this promise of communicating with people who you didn't even know yet, but like you could actually talk with them and expand your social circle and have a reliable way of having human contact. Now, back then it was based on anonymous names, it was based on just text, it was on a desktop computer where you had to sign in and like wait for the dial-up, and those teams at those companies saw it as like a way to generate traffic rather than a core service, right? Like the same way that they didn't view search as a strategic asset, they didn't view chat as a strategic asset.
Right.
So when the bad guys came in, they were like, wow, that's great. It's the same amount of usage. Like, we can sell the ads on the homepage for the exact same amount of money because no one's really looking at the chat rooms.
Yep.
But they left all those users disenfranchised. And so that human behavior was there. It just was viewed as a category failure, and no one had reimagined it, and no one had really considered, like, wow, a lot of people wanted to do that, and if you were to do it today, there's so much more in your favor.
Yep.
People are more comfortable with their real identities. Having it on your mobile device at a time when you have downtime, waiting in line, walking around town, sitting on commuting, like even at home, there's a lot of times when in a coin toss between playing a game or talking with another human being is a really compelling thing. And so we at least had that, but like people were definitely questioned the idea about it and were afraid that you couldn't get people to be honest and authentic. And we just believe that people are generally good and that like the bad guys are pretty small, but because the internet is so vast, they seem pretty big proportionally, but they're not. Like, they're really small. And so
the bad guys are corner cases. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so if you go into that with that assumption, then you can build a system where you assume people are good, you give them the benefit of the doubt, and you create a system where being good is rewarded rather than punished. And I think a lot about communication is the context, right? Email has a certain context where if I send you a message, I'm expecting a response. If I send you an SMS, I'm expecting a response even faster.
Yep.
But if I send you an @reply on Twitter, I may or may not get a response. Yep. And so all communication is about expectations. And so when we thought to set out to build Yobongo, we were being very cautious around what expectations are we setting and what sort of conversations will that foster.
So I mean, you set out to build this, but in doing so, you left what is one of the pioneers in the in the streaming space, in JustinTV. So this is a decision that doesn't come lightly to kind of leave that and leave your role there and move into something like Yobongo without some deep thought and some deep passion towards the concept and the product itself. Talk about your history about that decision to actually. There had to be a tipping point where you said, "Okay, we got to do this." And what was that like, leaving something like JustinTV, who hasn't had their day yet either, but is a growing successful company?
Sure. I mean, you hit it on the head. Like, it wasn't an easy decision at all. And the people at JustinTV are some of the smartest people I've ever worked with in my life. I mean, these guys know. I mean, it's a team of less than 30 serving over 30 million people.
It's incredible.
The scale is unbelievable, and they're doing something that hasn't been done before. And large internet services like Yahoo have attempted and failed at, right? So like, they're doing something special. And being involved with that and being involved at a service at such scale was such a learning experience. But I think what fundamentally got us to that point was that we'd always known that we wanted to do something our way. And when Yobongo started coming around and we started thinking about it, like, the opportunity to reimagine the way people communicate with people around them was just so big. And that, like, as we kept thinking about it and thinking about our experience with the JustinTV mobile applications and how well received they were, and like how taking JustinTV and cramming it into a phone doesn't work, that you have to build from first principles of live video and then go from there, right? Like, quality of video becomes really important. Like, you need to be able to adjust for different networks. Like, notifications become much more important. There's just a lot of things that when you view it through the lens of what's important for a device that you have at all times that has internet, you come to very different conclusions. And when we realized that, it was very clear that there's so many things on the internet that haven't been thought out like that. And if there's around 1 billion internet-connected PCs, there's going to be about 5 billion internet-connected devices. And so, just that basic rough math is like, the market is growing so quickly that there are so many people who need these better solutions, and they're currently stuck with carriers and apps that are secondary. There's a stepchild or 30 years old. So it just seemed like there's such a huge opportunity, like, actually do something better and do it well designed and do it with people at the core. That, as great as JustinTV is, JustinTV can't be that, and that's where our heads were at. And so when we realized that, we're like, we really need to find a way to go do this. So we started doing some prototypes nights and weekends, and sort of playing with it to see, like, is there anything here? We got some people using it, and like the more we used it, the more we realized like that there was something kind of cool about it. And you know, being two young guys, like clearly we have more options than someone who has a family. But ultimately, what it came down to was like having about a year's worth of savings, so that if we couldn't get funding or whatever, we weren't going to go, you know, hungry in a few months. So that was nice to make sure that we could have some savings. And you know, the worst that happens is it doesn't work out, and you go get another job somewhere, or you go back to JustinTV if they'll have you, and you're better for it, right? You've gone for it, you've tried it, you've experimented, you've learned, you've pushed yourself, and like those are all great things. And so the personal side of it was certainly challenging to leave all of our friends there, but they've been extremely supportive, and we're really excited about what they're doing, and they've got great things in the pipeline as well. So it's really fun that like expand that network as well.
It's kind of funny though, you know, I can imagine the conversations you were having around the time that you were leaving. So you know, what has been labeled somewhat, you know, kind of the future of broadcast, or you know, video on smartphones, and the distribution of video and the creation of video, and you know, the Citizen Journal and JustinTV fits into that very well. It's kind of like, you know, almost considered to be maybe what I would consider to be the future of the devices, right? So this is, at some point it'll be commonplace, but right now it's the future of the device. To go back almost in time to build something in layman's term, chat related, right? So the kind of the juxtaposition of the future in JustinTV versus the past in chat must have been hard to defend. And when you're trying to explain that, no, we're shifting the paradigm, we're doing things differently, we're going to re-engineer. I can imagine those conversations were long and some probably frustrating at the time, and you know, and now when you're so close to the product, it must be somewhat satisfying to be able to show people what you meant all those months ago.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like, it was not JustinTV is on the cusp of something very, very important around creating something that had never ever existed, right? Being able to assume that you could do live video at any time, anywhere in the world, is a fundamentally powerful thing.
Yeah.
And
I like to call that ballsy.
Yeah. Okay. Your words. Yeah. Those guys are ballsy. But I think what we were really excited by was that sort of the types of communication people have to have all the time. People are not creating as many relationships in the world as they could be.
Yeah.
And I think we certainly looked at the evolution of what Twitter did, not because Twitter is Twitter, but actually if you look at the media landscape, right? Creating a book, writing a book used to be limited to monks, right? Yeah. And the number of people who were educated were just monks, right? So it was monks writing books for other monks.
Yep.
And then we started teaching students how to read. And then we got the printing press, so we could print leaflets. And now you could expand. One person could take their thought and disseminate it out to a lot of people. And then newspapers came along, and then glossy magazines. And then we got to the internet, and people would publish their newspapers online. And then we got to blogging. Yeah. And the promise of blogging was that anyone in the world could publish any of their thoughts. And what was interesting about that was a lot of people did it, but not everyone. And yet everyone has thoughts in their head that they want to get out there. And so there was something missing, right? Like the technology was there, but there were human blocks. There was anxiety around publishing and putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
And Twitter had this interesting insight that if you make it a lot easier and you reduce the barriers to making it happen, you can expand the number of people who will do something. And so I think what's interesting to us about Twitter is it is more of a behavioral hack than a technology innovation. Yeah. Now, they are doing a lot on the technology side now to accommodate all that growth. But fundamentally, it was routing messages back and forth. And so what's interesting for a lot of people is like when they go on Hacker News or Dig, you'll see comments of, oh, I could have built that in a weekend. And of course you could. But that's after you understood what the insight was that they had. Yeah. And so our sort of belief is that a lot of consumer web and now mobile applications will be coming from some kernel of insight into the way that people behave that isn't widely known yet. and then you build technology around that to support that use case. So for us, it's most people want to meet new people, but they don't know how to do it, and that mobile phones are always with you, and what if you could communicate with someone vastly easier than you ever had before? How many new connections could be made in the world? And what if you could provide a reliable way that any point in time, anywhere in the world, you open up your phone and you can talk to someone interesting? That's pretty interesting. Like, that's pretty powerful. And so that's how we got there. And we have a long, I mean, we're 1 or 2% into this sort of endeavor. Yep. But fundamentally, people will always need to communicate with each other. People will always want to make new friends. And so that gives us a lot of confidence that this is something you can do for a very long time. And there's so much to do around it, and so much to explore on how do you do it on a device that not only have we not figured out the best paradigm for UIs on devices, but the palette is expanding, right? Like Apple is adding new crayons, right? They're giving us new gestures. Android is giving us new opportunities to interact with the real world through near-field communications, right? There's just so much that's expanding that it's not even set. Like HTML is basically set. HTML5 provides some interesting opportunities, but like it's not for the past 10 years, it's been pretty much set. Yep. Ajax was the biggest innovation we've seen, and now we all understand it. So the web is really a maturing technology, desktop web. Yep. But mobile is still this burgeoning thing. Like I sort of view it as like the early 80s of PCs, and I wasn't around at that time, but like
what I read in the history books.
Yeah, exactly. When I read in the history books, you sort of look at the shift from the mini computer to the PC age, that people in the mini computer industry thought PCs were toys.
Yes.
That no one could ever use them. Yep. And I think we're now crossing that point where having a smartphone isn't weird and geeky. It's actually quite compelling and useful for a lot of people. Yep. And not only is it important here in the US, but globally, there are people who are going from no internet to a internet-connected device and skipping the PC entirely. Yeah. I mean, I was out last night with some friends, and they have a 2-year-old, and he uses iPod Touch as a storybook. Yep. He goes around and touches everything, any screen he thinks he can touch. And so what does that mean long term? It's so amazing.
My children walk up to my TV set and swipe to change the channels. Right, so I mean, it's the paradigm that we're seeing is that, I would even expand a little bit further than that. In the early 80s, what we're seeing here in mobile is something that we've never seen. So even those guys in the 80s, I was very young in the 80s, and I witnessed firsthand the accelerant that was the internet. But what we're witnessing here is something that's far greater than both of those industries combined, because I don't think that anybody at any point in time could have ever imagined an industry where, as you said, 5 billion connected devices.
Right.
There isn't. I just came back from teaching a class at a local university, and it was a mix of software engineers, business and commerce, and history, and some art students in there, and 95% of them carried a smartphone. Right. So, like, you think about it's at an affordable point, and the tipping point happened a couple of years ago, and we've just never seen anything this big before. And you're right, so many technologies are converging right now. I think of it like tectonic shift, or tectonic plates shifting, or primordial soup. We don't know. You're trying to build something without a solid foundation, so you put it up and you test it, and then you see how that works. But you build a great product, and then you start adding things as you go along, that because you're getting feedback, visceral feedback. So, I mean, how do you come to those conclusions? How do you decide what goes into the product versus what you have to, kind of put off to the side? It's a great idea, but we've just got to focus on this. How does that get done?
So my background is user experience first and product, and so I am a big believer that people try and do too much with their products, almost always.
Yes.
And it's not this idea that it needs to be minimalist and like Apple, because that's clearly not true. But what I think a lot of people, or at least what we think about, is if you look at a service like Facebook or Twitter or Skype or any of these guys that are very large now, even MySpace back in the day, when you view it today, you see the evolution of years and years of advancement. And what a lot of people do is they say, okay, I'm going to take a snapshot of what this service is today, and I'm going to plus one it. I'm going to add dogs to it, or I'm going to add live video to it, or I'm going to do something. I'm going to add some trick, right? This would make it a little bit better for me type thing.
Yep.
And the problem is those services didn't start out that complex or that feature rich. They always started out much simpler, right? Facebook started out as a directory of profiles, and people forget that. Yep. And it provided utility even at that base piece, because what they were tapping into wasn't this massive need to communicate, but just a desire to understand who it was at your school who you had just met at a party.
Yep.
And what they did is over time slowly added in new features as a result of the user actions that people were expressing. So photos were added, in my belief, not because they wanted to crush Flickr or Photobucket or OPhoto, but because they saw that the girls and the guys in college were switching out their profile photo multiple times per day.
Yep.
And so they're like, wow, that's a very interesting dynamic. These people are trying to show off what they look like or things that they had done with their friends who are looking at their profile many times per day. Let's build a product that's around photos, but clearly people are at the core of that, and so that's why they had tagging by people, which seems like a massive innovation, but is a evolutionary idea for Facebook, because they have that sort of idea of the people in your network, right?
Right.
So
they're watching it happen. They're watching it unfold.
Yeah. So I think the way that we view it is a process of editing, that any good movie or any good book starts out with way more ideas and way more footage than ever makes it to what people eventually see. And so what that means is, like, you as a person creating a product have this massive idea of what it could be someday, and that's fine. Put that on the shelf. Look back at like what it is that today, with 10 people using it, would be interesting.
Right.
What would be the smallest amount of thing that you do would still be compelling for a few people, and do that insanely well. Because people's attention is being dragged in so many directions all day long that you need to lodge yourself so sharply and so intensely in someone's mind that when they think of your name, they think of exactly what you do.
Right.
And if you're going to try and create a new social network for people's friends, you have to win on photos, you have to win on messages, you have to win on all these fronts that it'll be very hard for you to do as a new entrant.
Yes.
But if you come along and say, we just want to help you like answer questions, that's pretty interesting. And FormSpring is a company that just lets you ask questions of someone and answer them.
Yep.
Now, if they had all sorts of other features, FormSpring wouldn't be as interesting because you'd have a very muddied view of what FormSpring does. And so on the mobile side, I think this is why you see so many apps that people think are so easy and could have built in a day, but they didn't, right? Like, they actually didn't, because it takes that inspiration to do it. And so what we think about is there's a lot of things that will eventually be a part of Yobongo. But not only do you want to not put them in now because they add complexity, but we can't make them awesome for the experience because we don't know what the experience really is. We don't know how people actually interact with it, and we don't know what the next logical thing they need to do is. So if you just think about it, so one way I think about it is like as a series of gates, right? So if you think about the way that sort of they manage water in like levees and things, like there's gates of how they let water through the system to like overflow, right? And even in a dam, right? There's these gates of water. So your end goal and vision is the gate at the very end, but you have to move the water slowly through each gate safely. You can't just let it all rush through because it won't work. You have to slowly fill up a gate, then get to the next one, fill it up, then you can release it, go to the next gate, right? So you have this sort of even keel of water and no sort of violent overflow or rushing that will break the dam.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's a great analogy.
A lot of people want to break down the dam right away, and a lot of people users are not prepared to be told you need to switch to us for everything because it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Like,
just do it the way that we want you to do it.
Yeah, just give me a little taste first. Then if you prove yourself, then you can do more and more and more, right? And like clearly the iPhone is an example of this, right? They didn't have a lot of features that people thought would be important, right? Yeah. Copy and paste is important, but is that going to be the thing that gets you to buy this device that is fundamentally different than anything you've ever used? No.
Yeah.
Right? And they wanted to put it in, but they didn't have time, and they also didn't think they had the best solution at the time.
Yep.
And it was more important that every animation was immensely smooth. And contrast this to someone like Android, where they have lots of teams that just stick in a whole bunch of features, and they don't all necessarily play well together.
Yep.
And so they're constantly trying to refine all these things at once, and I would argue is not as great of an experience.
No, that's it. You know, it's so funny because you know, oftentimes we'll see comparisons. You know, I'm up in Canada, so you know, RIM launching their first touchscreen. They didn't talk about copy and paste. They didn't talk about anything else. They just put two phones side by side. You know, the BlackBerry and the iPhone, and did a swipe. And they based their entire assumption on how good the device was based on the fluidity of the swipe from screen to screen.
Sure.
And one was clunky and one wasn't. And so that refined experience, as you said, is like they focused on getting that done, and then they could move on. It's like they get past this this desire to get that refinement done, don't they?
Right. And the other thing is that if you have one like core thing that you want people to do, you focus all of your users' attention on that one thing, which is what you want, right?
Yeah.
If you only have 10 or 100 or 1,000 users and you're asking them each to do 10 things, you've got 10% of your energy split amongst 10 things. And now, if like what actually happens is not that people don't do anything. It's just they do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And so then you're left in this quandary of, well, what do we do next, right? Like a lot of people are doing this, a lot of people are doing this. Everyone has something that they would prefer. And now you're left really wondering, what's the most important thing?
Yeah.
If you only do one thing and no one cares, now you've got something really interesting. You've got some good data there.
Yeah.
Like they didn't care. And there's this really strong desire to add more if people aren't doing what you want. And that normally is a wrong choice because you add more and then there's more confusion and there's more surface area.
Yep.
And so then new people have even less knowledge of what to do. So it's this virtuous, like actually a vicious cycle of a downward product. And what you tend to see is small products tend to get more complex over time because they add more features that people really need, and then they get to a point where they have to reboot. And so the goal is to not ever get to there, right? To keep the restraint.
Yep.
And so it's yet to be seen how some of these services today that are very popular will deal with that. Yet to be seen how we do it. But there's a lot of headroom still for us in terms of what we do, because you talk with a group of people and then you talk with one-on-one.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's a very simple proposition, and if people like it, they'll use it more and they'll tell their friends and things will grow. If they don't like it, we need to go back to the drawing board.
So when do you guys start to think about, so you're self-funded, there's no venture, there's no angel, it's kind of you guys with savings working on it. It's good that you guys have complementary skills and you can do that. At what point do you start to think about how do you generate revenue from something like this? You know, is that on top of mind, or are you still just trying to create that product that just resonates with people?
Sure. So we are certainly focused on creating a product that people like. You know, making money from something is about extracting value, and we just don't think you can extract value before you've created a lot of it.
Yeah.
And so right now we haven't created much value because we don't have many people loving what we do. It's not even available. And so you can go down a path of making money out the first door, and there are people who will say that's the best strategy. But for us, especially as a communication system, the value of a communication system comes from lots of people using it. And so that's why the application will be free, is that we want as many people in the world to be able to use Yobongo to communicate with others and meet new people. And over time, there will be interesting opportunities to make money from that, but not to the detriment of the consumer experience, right? I can't imagine any person who really likes banner ads, even the people who sell them and the people on their site who run them. So we just don't think you have to make money that way. And
it's an old paradigm. It's an old paradigm on a new model. I mean, that needs to be blown up as well, right?
Yeah. And so we're just not prepared to do that yet, but we want to. And the other thing is that if you really want to redefine the way you make money, you need to be in the driver's seat. Yeah. You need to be the one who has the ability to say, this is what our users will respond to, and this is how we'll do it. So that's all great and good, but like, how do we actually pay our bills? How do we feed ourselves? So I think that certainly raising some money is in our future.
Yep.
And that is certainly something that is, you could have a whole discussion about how you go about doing that. But the Cliff Notes version is, we talked to some people in October when we left and sort of were socializing the idea around to some different investors. And they liked the team. Working at JustinTV certainly helps.
Yep.
they like the idea, like the market, right? So there's sort of three things that investors talk about of team, product, and market. So they like the team, they like the idea of a market, but they weren't sure if it was actually going to work, right? Social services tend to be quite finicky. People really like them, or they really just don't care.
Or they do the arc and then they plummet.
They just sort of die really fast. They're sort of flash in the pan.
Yep.
And so, you know, there were some people who were willing to back us because they knew us very well. But we had to go out and prove that people would really care.
Yeah.
And I would say that is probably the biggest piece of advice I could give is like, build something so good that when you show it to people, they get it. That when there's a time before they used it and there's a time after it. Yeah. And that it's so stark that they lean over to their friend who they're with and they're like, you got to check this thing out. Yeah. That's how you're viral, right? If you get your friend to tell someone who they sit next to or at dinner with or at lunch, you should check out this app, you have a viral coefficient of 1. Yeah. One person brought another person. Yeah. If they then tell 2 people, you have a viral coefficient of 2 and you're going to grow immensely fast. Okay. It's a very, very simple thing. If one person loves what you do and they tell one of their friends, you're going to have a viral product. And
you've got a guy like Gary Vaynerchuk in love with your product. He's a viral machine, right?
He can bring in a lot of people, right? Gary has the potential to bring in a lot of people. And, you know, Gary is just another guy. Yeah. He's a guy who wants to talk with people. He's a very social guy. Yeah. And he likes new stuff. And he has an iPhone. And he's traveling a lot alone on airports, in airports, you know, going around doing his speaking thing. And, you know, Yobongo gives him the opportunity to chat with people and communicate and have some human connection and not be mobbed, right? He's in a room with 15. It's like a very intimate sort of setting.
And he's an IRC guy. He's a chat guy. So it was an easy transition for him to be able to use a product like this.
Right. And, you know, IRC has so many great benefits, but it's always been relegated to techies. Yeah. Techies understand, but techies also know that, like, they can't necessarily see why other people can't get it and use it. And so what we say is, like, there's a lot of good stuff happening in IRC. Let's make it palatable for a lot of people. Right. Make that experience easier to understand. Make the experience more compelling. Make it smoother and richer. And get rid of the things that are blocks for people to use it.
Well, it's, you know, when you describe that essence, the essence of the product ultimately, and making sure that people understand that it's probably the reason why Google Wave failed, right? Great concept, great product, but it was so many different things to so many different people that ultimately it could never have succeeded because nobody could describe it, right? And you're the exact opposite of that. Start with that great product that does one thing exceptionally well, and then listen. I guess. So what's the plan now? Is that you guys are a number of months into this, and you're launching very shortly. And right before this session, you were talking with TechCrunch. You know, I have a bunch of people who ask me all the time: is that how do you get in front of TechCrunch, and then what's the impact of something like TechCrunch and coverage in TechCrunch or Mashable, and why do it? Does it work? Those kind of questions. Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, so I think the important thing to think about for the press is their audience and their interest is in providing news and compelling stories to their readers. Yeah. And so that means you need to understand what their readers want. So TechCrunch readers, Mashable readers, VentureBeat, ReadWriteWeb, all these guys have a rabid readership that is looking for the cool new technology that might be able to help them out, and is also being read by investors and other press. Yeah. And so what you need to think about is what is different about your product that when read with 20 other stories in a day will make it stand out and be unique for them, right? If you have another check-in service that lets you get a deal at, like, Subway instead of Chipotle, that's going to be hard for them to explain the nuance of why that's cool in a headline. Yep. And so when you reach out to these guys, first off, make sure you have a demo that they can play with. Because if they don't know who you are, it's going to be really hard for them to have any credibility that, like, what you're building is worth their time at all, because they get thousands of emails every day. So first off, like, lead off with a very compelling subject, like, this is what we do, that's it. Yeah. Then make sure you link to a demo right away in the top. And write less than 3 or 4 sentences. Yeah. If you send them a big block of text, they will see it, archive it, and maybe gets back to it. If they can actually process it in a minute or two, your chances are much higher that they'll at least say, look, click on the link, and like if it's anything interesting, they'll say, hey, can you tell me more?
Yeah.
Leave them wanting more, right? Like the same way that when you go on a first date, you don't tell them your entire life story. You just sort of tease about what's interesting to you and what you like, and you're trying to get a second date. You're not trying to marry them on the first date. Yeah. So like when you talk to the press, like treat it that way, right? Yeah. Treat it like it's going to be a relationship that you form over time, and maybe they can't write about you right now, but they're at least thinking about you, and they now know who you are, and you can continually update them. Yeah. One of my good friends, who's really good at marketing and PR, has this idea that you need to get people from no to yes, and it's an arc, right? You need to show them and break down the barriers from them to say no to actually saying yes, and so you need to continue to prove yourself. So for instance, like TechCrunch, you email one of the writers there, email tips, and you maybe just say like, hey, I'm working on this new thing, it's just me, this is why I think it's interesting, this is my background, I'm a computer science student at the University of Michigan, I built this app that I think is really cool because it does this, and I would love your feedback on it. Yep. Just send that note. Yep. And they might not respond right away. Then in a few weeks say, hey, I emailed you about this thing, we added these new features, and our users are really loving it, and our page views doubled. Yep. Send that note, right? Just continually do that at a 2 or 3 week interval, and tailor it to the right person. MG Siegler writes about Apple, and if you're going to create an Android app, you probably don't want to send it to MG, you want to send it to Jason. Yep. Jason Kincaid writes about Android. Yep. He's an Android fanboy. MG is an Apple fanboy. Yeah.
And they'll take offense, won't they, sometimes? Sure. Yeah, well, you haven't done your homework.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like they get so many people who don't know what they're talking about and just sending a random blast that if they know you crafted it just for them, just the same way that if someone's trying to get in touch with you, you don't like getting a sales email that says, dear sir or madam, right? Like, if you don't even know what gender I am, I'm clearly not at the top of your email list, right?
We have no relationship here.
Yeah, so pay attention to that. Yeah. And then I think it just sort of evolves from there. I mean, MG wrote about one of my first things 3 years ago when he wasn't even at TechCrunch, before VentureBeat. Yeah. And so he's seen me do things over time, and I've kept in touch with him. And so, building a relationship with the press is a good thing. The same way that, like, when you meet someone for the first time, you don't ask them to like cat sit or like dog sit you, like your house or your animals. Like,
well, that's what I was going to use Yobongo for.
Yeah, maybe in Yobongo you'll be able to do that, but like you don't normally just ask something of someone when you first meet them. Yeah. It's very rude, and so you shouldn't just ask the press to write about you. Yeah. Maybe you saw them write something interesting and you leave comments, so they start to know that you're a thoughtful guy or a thoughtful girl. And then maybe you've got some interesting insight in one of their products, and so you send them some more information about an article they wrote or a tip about something you thought about. And if you tweet and you blog, that's another great way to raise your profile, so that they know who you are. There's a lot of ways to get to them, but don't think of it as writing a press release and then the press will come and write about it. No. There's a great Office episode that I love, and one of the scenes is they have a problem with one of the watermarks on the paper, and Michael Scott, the main character, wants to call a press conference because he's seen big companies call press conferences, and one guy shows up from the obits of the local paper, right? You can't call a press conference if you're a startup of 2 people, so don't act like it.
Well, and so, what have you seen with your history with this? Have you seen good impact from this? And is this the be all and end all, or are these guys? We talked a little bit about this before we went live. Are these guys are really stepping stones sometimes to traditional or larger media for distribution, aren't they?
So I think that clearly the press is a great way to raise awareness of what you're doing. They are an amplifier that they can drive a lot of people to come and look at your website for a second. Yes. And these people are clicking on, like, you have to imagine, like, there's 20 or 30 stories on a lot of these services every day. So, like, if everyone clicked on all of them and spent 10 minutes, you would never be able to get any work done. Now, there's some people who don't get any work done, and maybe those people will help you out. But fundamentally, there's a lot of people who are just browsing around, and they think about something cool, they look at your site, and if you don't grab them, it doesn't work. Yeah. So it goes back to what we were talking about before. Like, if you have a really compelling thing, then it's very useful for you. If you don't, and you've been able to sort of trick them into writing about you, it's not going to do you any good, and it'll just be a flash in a pan. And there's lots of stories about the TechCrunch bump or the dig bump before to the Slashdot bump. So like capitalizing on that is tough. But there's also certainly something about the idea that the more that you have other people besides you sort of tell people that what you're doing is interesting or provide perspective, it certainly helps attract more attention and more press.
Take a look at the product today. We were talking about this before, just about the pristine nature of the product. Single focus, easy to explain. Take a look at the product today versus the idea that you had when you started coding this on the weekends a year ago. How close are you to that vision? Or did you come to a point where you just kind of looked around and said, we are way off here, we got to refocus, recenter, come back down, do more, do less?
So we actually have added a little more since we started, and it is one of the things that we didn't have was private communications.
Yeah.
We knew we wanted to do that at some point, but we thought, let's just start with the group people and the people you don't know.
Yep.
And what we found is as we tested it with people, they actually wanted to make the connection. Like they were talking with people and it was fun, but then they would never see each other again. So there was no way to build that link. And so that came out, so we decided to add that as a result of people telling us that in their usage they would meet someone cool, but then they would never see them again. And so it's like, okay, well, they need a way to stay in touch so that even when they're not online at the same time or in the same place, can continue building that relationship and that communication channel. So we actually added that. But we knew we wanted to do it at some point, we just weren't sure when. And we were concerned that that would make it really, that might be too much, that talking with the group and then talking one-on-one, because like there's lots of ways to talk one-on-one with someone.
Yeah.
But what we found was that for Yobongo, it was important because these were new connections and you had no way of keeping in touch, right? You can't give your email out in that public space. And so people really did need it. And so I think we really stayed true to what we were building because we had a very simple idea in the beginning anyways, and we wanted to play with this dynamic of, well, what if you could actually talk to people who are around you? Like there are clearly people around you who are interesting, who you could be friends with if they were introduced by someone else, or you met them at work, or for some reason you happen to bump into them and you spill coffee on them and then like you have to talk to them, right?
Yeah. Oh no.
Yeah, exactly. You talk to them and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, here's my card, like let me buy that for you, and then you go and get coffee again and then you find out, hey, this guy's pretty cool.
Yep.
There's a lot of sort of happenstance and serendipity around how you actually meet people, and making that more reliable was really interesting. So that's sort of the kernel that we were playing with. And so we wanted to sort of get to the essence of how you might do that. And so that's why we don't have photos, we don't have video, we don't have SMS, we don't have a web client, like all these things that people would want and ask for and think are interesting and important, we don't have yet, because if the first thing doesn't work, none of those matter.
It doesn't matter, you're right.
And so I think that's back to that gate analogy, right? Like it'd be amazing if you had the web client and SMS and you could interface with Twitter and Facebook and Food Spotting and Foursquare and all these guys, right? But fundamentally, they won't care about that unless you sort of deliver on the promise of being able to meet interesting people. So solve that first.
I mean, I think that's like I look at a company like Instagram, and that's their mantra as well, is that they basically said, they didn't have a web client
right.
and they still don't, but they've opened up their API because they're focusing on the experience, and the experience is on a mobile device. It's not a web client. So it's I love that thinking, and the way that their logic is very close to the way that you guys think, is just get one thing done and do an excellent job and make people use it, because the rest doesn't matter if nobody's using it.
There's so many, exactly. There's so much that doesn't matter until a lot of people are using it, and that you have to think about how are you going to attract that first user, how are you going to attract that first 10, that first 100, that first 1,000. And this comes up with investors. They're like, well, how are you going to scale users? How are you going to acquire users? And a lot of times people start talking about user acquisition methods like SEO and all these things. But those are all just sort of byways and highways to getting you to a destination. And if you don't want to go to that destination, it doesn't matter how many ways there are to it. It won't matter, right?
Yeah.
People find a way to get to Fiji, even though you should never go to Fiji because it's way too far and the island is too small, and Hawaii is another example, right? But people find a way because it's just so compelling to get to Hawaii. Yeah. Now, if we built a bridge from California to Hawaii, a lot more people would go. But that doesn't necessarily mean we should build one, and you don't need one for Hawaii to exist and be a thriving thing.
Yep.
Now, if Hawaii was sort of a startup, they would probably find a way to build a bridge, right? Because they would want as many people to come as possible. But the other challenge about that is if everyone went to Hawaii, it wouldn't necessarily be Hawaii anymore.
Yeah.
And so there are also issues around when you scale, how do you keep that magic of what you had in the beginning? If everyone went to the Four Seasons, they wouldn't have enough staff, right? And this is what's really tough about services that get really big really fast, is that there's always the risk that the dynamics change so much with so many new people who don't understand how it works, that the same way when you go from a tiny little school to a massive college, like your head spins so fast you don't understand like how the social dynamic works. In a company that grows really fast, the people dynamics are very hard to manage.
Yeah.
The same thing happens with a web service when a lot understand how the rules work. And so you also want to be cognizant that maybe you don't want 1 million users tomorrow. Maybe 1,000 would be great. And then maybe 10,000 would be great.
But isn't it, certainly it's not about the number of users as much as it is the number of engaged users, number of conversations, number of relationships being formed, as opposed to just getting 1 million signups and no activity, right?
Exactly, yeah. And I think that is important too, right? Like focusing on what, if it happened a lot more, would actually lead to success.
Yeah.
So for us, it's people using it many times per day and creating new relationships and over time, right? So we want to see people, we then want to see them creating private messaging, and then we want to see that those private messages continue to flow over many, many months. Yeah. And that's sort of what you want to track. You don't want to track and aggregate how many messages are sent, because like spammers send a message just as much as a regular person, yes. And maybe spammers send way more messages because they just send one link 1,000 times, where Bill Gates using your service once is a really compelling thing for a lot of people.
Boys that are Om Malik or any of those guys using it.
Or any of those guys, yeah. So, you just have to be very thoughtful around what are the things that if it happened a lot would actually be good, rather than the things that when you take a snapshot are interesting to sort of think are cool, right? Like clearly being tall for playing basketball is important, but like you don't have to be the tallest to be the best.
Yep.
And so you don't have to have the most users right away to be the best or to beat a competitor. You have to have the most engaged and most thoughtful and most sort of loving users doing the thing that you think is most important, because that's how you can leverage that into doing something.
It's validation for what you're doing, ultimately, isn't it?
Yep. I mean, and that's the thing that we love is like when we see people using the app and tweeting out that they think it's addicting and that they love it, it's like it's just so rewarding, because that's why we do it.
Yeah.
We do it because we want to build something, and we want to build something that other people are going to find a lot of value from. And it's so cool building a communication system, because these people are building relationships and going and having coffee with people and making new friends, and like being just this tiny little piece of enabling that is like awesome. It's so cool. So I love the idea of communication systems, because they are you get to be the guy who gets to help grandma talk to their grandson eventually. Absolutely. Right? And that's just so powerful. So,
I mean, what's next for you guys? What are your hopes when it comes to this thing? I know that you're about to launch, and so what do you hope? If you looked a little bit into the future and you think, what would make you satisfied with the way you're launching now?
I think what would make us satisfied is that for the cities where it launches, that the magic we've seen in the beta continues, that people continue to find interesting people to talk to, that we are able to facilitate these new connections being made, and that people say that they love using Yobongo, that it becomes a part of their daily life, and that it's something that they didn't know they needed but now can't live without. Yeah. I mean, that's ultimately what we would love to see. That's a very lofty goal, and but that's where we're driving towards. I mean, we want to build something that people love to use, rather than something that they trudge through like TurboTax.
That's like TurboTax. Yeah, you want to create that experience, and it all comes back to making sure that the product does what you say it does or what it's supposed to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately a consumer web product and consumer mobile is about what people interact with. I mean, building a company, you have to deal with financials, you have to deal with recruiting, you have to deal with hiring, you have to deal with technology, you have to deal with space. There's so many things that can, if you let it, be the bulk of what you do and what you think about. But ultimately, all your customers and your users care about is what they interact with on a daily basis. And for you, that might only be 10% of your mind that you can spend, but for them, it's 100%. Yeah. And so everything you can do to spend more time on refining that product makes you better in the mind of your users. And a lot of companies, as they get bigger, spend more and more as a percentage of their thought process and energy on the tasks of running a company rather than the task of creating something awesome. And this is why every single year there are new startups that disrupt large companies, because their focus is almost entirely on creating something awesome and something new in the world. And they are not a company, they are just people creating something. And that's why big companies acquire small companies, because they want to get that magic. But our view is that the challenge is when you get really big, communication overhead becomes a big challenge, and you start to become insular and try and defend what you have rather than go out and create something new. Yeah. And that's just a cycle that's played out for decades and decades in the tech sphere.
Boy, is it ever. Well, Caleb, I've hogged your time tonight.
It's great. This is a lot of fun. I love talking about Yobongo and talking about our experience and sharing as much as possible. And I'd like to say to anyone else out there who wants to talk more, you can email me, Caleb@Yobongo, and I'll do my very best to respond to your messages. And if you're working on something new or have some questions, the best advice, just like I said, to reach out to the press is be as short as possible so I can actually respond to it right away instead of archiving it and never getting to it. So quick questions are easy and I can respond, and would love to help people out, because 6 months ago I was just some guy working out of my house with this crazy idea, and now we get to be on a podcast and talk about what we're doing and have people think we know what we're doing, but we still don't know what we're doing. We just get to talk like we do.
Well, I definitely appreciate you doing this and taking some time out of your day, and especially around the time that you're launching. So I'll look forward to this. When you'll be launched by the time I think this goes live. So they just go to yobongo.com, sign up, and they'll be able to download the app from the app stores, obviously.
Correct. Yep. Just go to yobongo.com, and you will be able to download the app and put it on your phone, and hopefully use it. We're going to be rolling out to select cities to start with, so that we can make sure the experience is really good. And however, there's a way that you'll be able to vote to bring it to your city. And so the cities that get the most votes, we will bring it to first. And so if you do a really good job of recruiting your friends and people in your neighborhood, we'll be coming to your city sooner than we would maybe if we were just have to pick out of a hat.
Well, before you leave, I love the viral nature of the way that what you've done is if you sign up for the trial on the website or a preview or a beta, you get bonus points or accelerated or put to the top by spreading the word or inviting 3 of your friends or more, right? And
right.
So that must, I love that concept. It certainly helps in the viral nature of this. And as you said, it's one-to-one or one-to-many relationships that are going to create the value here. It's going to grow it. So, it's small things like that, good, thoughtful things that if this goes into the product, that's what people will remember about the product and really love about it.
Yeah, I think the closing thought I would have is that when you pare back what you want to do, you can focus more of your thought process and energy on doing it better than anyone's ever done it before. Yeah. If you want to do a lot of things, what you tend to do is look at what other people have done and assume that they did it right, and copy them kind of in the back of your head, trying to trick yourself that you're not copying them, but you really are.
Yeah.
And my favorite example of this is great chefs. Great chefs don't use many ingredients. They use few ingredients that are extremely high quality, and they use strong technique to create that, right?
Yeah.
The perfect roast chicken is chicken, salt, pepper, and a little butter.
Yeah.
Right? That's it. And the difference between your roast chicken and Thomas Keller's roast chicken is vast, but the big difference is not that he uses different ingredients, but that he's done it a lot and that he's thought about it a lot and has continued to refine it. And so now when he wants to make a roast chicken, it's probably one of the best in the world.
Absolutely.
But if you're trying to do a restaurant that is like a diner and does every single dish from every single cuisine, it's probably not that good. So think about a restaurant. The good restaurants have few items in their menu. They focus on them. They care about them. And when you eat them, they're delicious. And when you go to that type of restaurant, you get that type of food and you get that kind of experience.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to please everyone and create an environment where you think it's for everyone, but it's actually for no one.
Well, it's great advice, Caleb. Look, man, I really appreciate you you spending so much time because it's been so valuable to me. I'm sure it's been valuable to the people who are watching and listening to this, and hopefully it becomes a continued resource when when you need to your head shaken a little bit when you're in the middle of your product development, or you're looking at investing in a company, and just hopefully you can listen to this again, and it's a refocus because some huge valuable lessons that came out of this, and I look forward to getting some feedback from this. So Caleb, again, really appreciate it. I've been speaking with Caleb Elston, who's the co-founder and CEO of Yobongo, Yobongo.com, and look for it in the App Store by the time this comes out, if it's available in your city. What cities are you guys rolling out to?
We'll be in New York City, San Francisco, and Austin to start with, and rolling out to cities across the world very quickly soon after.
And then start voting.
Start voting.
Yeah, exactly. Start submitting. Caleb, thanks again, man. I really appreciate this.
Thank you.
And
this
thank
was
you
great.
for watching.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for watching, and I really appreciate your support in this. And let me know what you think of this latest installment of Untether.tv. Thanks, Caleb.
Thanks.